Live on air, online at valleycentral.com. This is CBS 4 News at 6.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Marcy Martinez coming to you live from the Bogus Ford Event Center in the city of FAR. We are here for our town hall meeting, Your Voice, Your Future, focusing on immigration. We're going to get to that in just a few minutes, but right now I want to get you caught up on headlines that we're following tonight. First, Senators John Cornyn and Bill Cassidy are touring the border region today, focusing on border security, trade, and economic development issues crucial to this area and the nation. They were taken by helicopter and by boat along the Rio Grande to get a first-hand look of the agents' work along the border, and also got a tour of the FAR Reynosa Bridge in McAllen Border Patrol Station. Our Annalisa Ortiz is following their trip. She will have the latest for you tonight on CBS 4 News at 10. Also happening now, Starr County officials are looking to put a stop once and for all, they tell us, to illegal eight-liner operations, and they're calling it Operation Bishop West, a nod to Cameron County's Operation Bishop, as we've been reporting, aims to crack down on the criminal epidemic. Now, officials in Starr County say the establishments pocket the revenue that's coming in. None of it is going back into the cities in the county or local economy, and even target unsuspecting victims such as the elderly. So coming up tonight at 10, you'll learn more about Operation Bishop Westover in Starr County and how they plan to put an end to all of the criminal activity there. Also tonight, the number of sex assault cases has more than doubled in one valley city. San Benito police are telling us the number of rapes has gone from 12 in the year of 2014 to over 30 in 2015. Earlier this month, CBS 4 News first reported one case of a man who crawled in through a bedroom window of a San Benito home and sexually attacked a woman there inside. Chief Michael Galvan says the numbers could actually be higher because some victims fear coming forward.
International people that are from other countries here inside the city, a lot of them are afraid to come forward. They don't believe that being a victim, they think they're going to get deported.
On CBS 4 News at 10, what San Benito police are doing to curb and combat the rise in sex crimes and what you need to know to avoid becoming a victim. That's most important. Now, the city of McAllen is currently looking at possibly charging residents a drainage utility fee. Did you know public drainage issues can be very expensive for the city and its residents? That's why, in an effort to lower the amount of stormwater runoff during heavy rains, the proposed fee would help with the cost to maintain and manage the city drainage system. The fee at this time is estimated to be around $2.50.
I would have to consider supporting it. The downside is I think $2.50, up to that is quite a bit of money for people to have to pay.
The city declined to comment on the fee, saying it's too early to discuss the proposal. We invite you to check out these stories on our social media pages. We're on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll be taking questions live throughout tonight's town hall here in FAR. Use the hashtag Your Voice, Your Future, and I will update you throughout the evening with other stories we're following or any breaking news before CBS 4 News at 10 tonight. Find me on Twitter at MarcyKGBT and on Facebook.com/Marcy Martinez CBS 4. Right now, let's go back to our CBS 4 News studios and check in with the chief about the temperatures out there. Brian.
Well, Marcy, we're talking about a big temperature spike into the mid-90s by Thursday before everything falls off behind a frontal boundary. A cold front moving on in on Thursday into Friday. Futurecast shows how we are nice and warm and humid, kind of sticky, lots of clouds, maybe a couple of little showers in the morning, but otherwise Wednesday will be a partly cloudy day. Thursday, there's your wind shift coming on ahead of the front, but still the damage is done. We'll be in the mid-90s. And then by sunrise Friday, we've got that cold front moving on through, setting us up for a much cooler weekend ahead. Problem is, we're also watching a setup from upper-level low pressure to make for at least a slight chance for showers this up-and-coming weekend. Just a slight chance, nothing too super duty. All right, the extended forecast of the weekend always in view. Again, we're talking about a major shift. We'll re-examine that shift at 10.
Thanks, Brian. And we are now ready to kick off our town hall meeting here live in the city of FAR at the Bogus Ford Event Center. You still have time to make it on down and watch live in the audience or watch online, valleycentral.com. Enjoy your evening. I'll see you back here at 10.
Live from the Bogus Ford Event Center in Pharr, Texas, CBS 4 News presents Town Hall. Your voice, your future. Immigration.
Undocumented, immigrant, alien, amnesty, illegal, rule of law, pathway to citizenship. So many terms and phrases, they inspire optimism or incite rage, depending on who says them and how they're used. Good evening, I'm Mark Hyman, host of Behind the Headlines. Thank you at home for joining us, and thank you to the listeners of our radio partner, News Talk 710 KURV. We have a great panel of experts ready to answer questions put to them by our live audience here. But they're not the only ones who get to drive tonight's discussion. You at home watching us can also be a part of this discussion. CBS 4 anchor Tiffany Huertas is manning our social media desk. She'll explain how you can be part of the discussion. Tiffany?
Thanks, Mark. That's right. A lot of questions coming into our social media on Facebook, on Twitter, using the hashtag Your Voice, Your Future. All the questions, of course, have to deal with immigration. Now, if you are on Facebook, you can go to CBS 4 Rio Grande Valley, and on Twitter, CBS 4 News, of course. And keep those questions coming. I'll be here manning the center, and we can go ahead and ask those questions to the panelists.
Thanks, Tiffany. Now, this is a town hall. It's all about getting questions asked and answered. But the first question tonight will not go to our panel of experts, but instead will go to my live audience here. I'd like you to respond to the following statement with the sound of applause. Your two choices and answers are yes and no. Please respond to this statement. Our immigration system is broken. Those who believe yes, please applaud. Those who believe no, please applaud. I want to put the same question to our panel of experts. Is our immigration system broken? If you think yes, please raise your hand. I guess I don't even have to ask the no question. Let's go right to our live audience for the first question of the evening. Sir, please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
Okay. Yes, my name is Royal Laman. I'm with the VFW Post 7473 in Elsa, Texas. A lot of service members and veterans are not citizens of the United States, but they felt that it was their patriotic duty to come across to serve for this great country. Now, how do you support, and how would you try to get these great service members and veterans citizenship?
Mr. Oliveros, Counselor, what do you think?
Absolutely, of course. I support veterans who have served this country being able to obtain a legal status and eventually citizenship. There was a case recently that was in the news here in the Valley of a veteran who came back, when he was in the service, apparently he never got the guidance necessary to get his documents in order, and when he came back, he got in some trouble with the law, and then he was being deported. He was at risk of being deported. I think that's a travesty, and that should be addressed in a way that is just. After someone risks their life for this country, they should have a right, absolutely, to at least remain in the country.
Mr. Garza, what do you think?
Well, speaking on a personal level, I can say absolutely. The fact that a man or woman has committed their service to the country and signed up for military service in some way, shape, or form does entitle them to citizenship in the United States of America. Obviously, they've by enlisting, they've exhibited their allegiance, respect, and loyalty to our country. And so I believe, by all means, that after their service, following a legal recourse, that they should be allowed for U.S. citizenship.
So, Ms. Moreira, does this mean that service members who are not legal citizens, should they have a different path towards citizenship? Should they be treated differently or treated the same as everyone else?
They should have an immediate path to citizenship. If someone has risked their life to serve our country and to protect our citizens, there should be no waiting line for them, because they did not wait to serve for us. There should be an immediate path to citizenship for people that served our country.
We're back to the live audience. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
Hi, my name is Beatriz. I'm from Edinburgh, Texas. I'm just a concerned citizen. My question is about inhumane deportation programs in private detention centers. Should the local government hold illegal immigrants on ICE detainers at the risk of losing state funding?
Mr. Brand, what do you think?
If I understand your question with ICE and how they deal with the families.
Right.
I believe that part of the problem, and I think it's part of your question, is how they're treated.
Right. Yes, sir.
And one distinction I can tell you that I'm aware of is that all the unaccompanied children that come into the United States are handled by HHS and ORR. All those that come as families are handled by ICE. The biggest difference that I'm aware of is that those that ICE takes care of, they are handled by contractors that are prison companies, private prison companies. ORR has taken a different approach. They changed several years ago from prison systems and said the only people that are eligible to participate in the program and assist us are faith-based organizations. They have a totally different attitude, a totally different approach. If you go to one of those facilities, there are no locks on anything. The children most of them are very happy just to be there. 3 hot meals and a bed to sleep in. So I think the way they're treated and how they're dealt with is between the two is totally different. I think that is a problem because the prison system, a prison private company, has a different attitude about how they handle people.
Mr. Brand, a quick follow-up then. Who's responsible? Who should take charge? If we want to see uniformity at how people are treated, whether it's this way or that way, who's ultimately responsible to make certain that happens?
Well, obviously, we all know it's the federal governments right now. They're the ones that have taken that responsibility. I do believe that there are discussions of trying to adopt a different approach because of all the way ICE has handled the families as we all know over the last couple of years. And I think that move is where I think they're going, and I think it's a wise decision to make.
Mr. Oliveras, we've been bordering other nations for a while now. So why is it we're at this point where we still don't have systems in place that at least are uniform? How is it that we don't seem to have a policy that's the same in one jurisdiction versus another, federal versus state or local?
Well, the immigration policies and laws are federal, and those apply equally throughout the country. I think even though we've been bordering Mexico and Canada for a few years now, the different immigration waves and immigration phenomena that have happened throughout the years have led to immigration reform that have been responsive to those phenomena. So I think that's why over the years the rules have changed from time to time. But right now it's a federal law. So if when you talk about jurisdiction, if I understand your question correctly, the federal laws apply the same throughout the country.
Well, and I wanted to follow up on some of the comments Mr. Brand made because as Mr. Brand points out, there are differences in the way certain entities are treating those who are detained, and it varies depending on where they could be incarcerated or detained or enclosed. Why isn't the system uniform? In fact, let me go with Ms. Moretta here, bring her into the conversation. It seems that we're reactive to the immigration issue as opposed to being proactive. Do we need to kind of break this whole thing down and take a look at how we handle these situations so that there's some uniformity in how people are treated, the laws are enforced the right way, or changed, or whatever needs to happen?
Absolutely. I think that the system as we have now, our immigration system, is built to serve a specific kind of people. It's built to certain qualifications. It's built to allow a certain kind of immigrants into our country. If you do not meet those recommendations or qualifications, your treatment changes. If you are not in the STEM field, if you're not highly skilled or educated, irregardless of what your background is, or if you had an opportunity to become highly skilled or educated, it used to be also even your sexual orientation or the country that you came from would block you from entering the country. All of those things have changed due to on-the-ground organizing, our community speaking up and defending minorities in our country and immigrants that are coming in. In the topic of detention centers, it still continues to be that women, LGBTQ people, that's lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and especially transgender immigrants, they are at high risk of violence in detention centers. And it is really such a shame that we have a country in which people are making a profit out of detaining immigrants and filling up bed quotas. No one should be detaining immigrants and making a profit out of it. It is one thing to be detaining immigrants for public safety and to keep our country safe, and it is a different conversation that someone is increasing the zeros in their bank account detaining immigrants.
I want to bring Mr. Garza back in the conversation. I want to make certain people understand CBS 4 doesn't have a position on this issue. We certainly just want to carry on the conversation, but let's follow up with what Ms. Moretta Hay just said and talk about the immigration aspect, it's interesting that earlier in 2015, Congress wanted to triple the number of H-1B visas. So at one end, we say we want to bring in more of certain types of people who are immigrants, and the other end, there's some question about limiting. And whether that's right or wrong, CBS 4 is not here to say, but to an outside observer, you're sometimes struck with the impression that perhaps there isn't a solid overall immigration plan in place. Does that seem like a reasonable observation?
Well, I think what we've seen over the last 2 decades and certainly over recent years is inaction by the federal government on comprehensive immigration reform. We've seen that, you know, the current administration, the first 2 years of the administration had full control of one political party in both the House and the Senate and the U.S. Congress and failed to even address the issue. And so what we've seen is that that the White House has, in large regard, used executive action to provide short-term solutions to immigration that are not sustainable, that are not long-term, and that really don't address the issue, the broader issue. You know, you talk about detention centers, but we, got to focus on the broader issue of immigration, that it hasn't been addressed, and unfortunately, it's been used as a political ploy by both parties, and nobody's acted on it. It seems that every election year, something comes around, and immigration is the top of the issues. And the Hispanic community across the United States has been adversely affected by it. And so in regards to, being a border state in Texas, it's near and dear to our hearts. We see it every single day. Many of us have families that are immigrants, from Central American countries and mostly Mexican-American immigrants here in the state of Texas. And so obviously it's an issue that needs to be addressed by Congress, working together with both parties and the president to finally enact something that provides a long-term solution, sustainable solution to reform, where we no longer have to deal with public and private entities dealing with detention centers or whatnot, the influx of the border. And in regards to the economy, there needs to be a free market-based approach to immigration where the employer and the employee have a relationship. Obviously, the federal government has failed to enact and to enforce federal immigration laws. That is their primary responsibility. In Texas, our own governors have had to act on that. But a worker visa program that allows a free flow of immigrant labor based on market forces is really the key approach to immigration reform.
We have a lot of great questions so far in the first 10 minutes of the discussion. Before we get back into the discussion, though, we've got to pay the bills here at CBS 4. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, but we'll be right back. Please stay with us.
You're watching a special presentation of CBS 4 News Town Hall. Your voice, your future. Immigration.
I'd like to welcome back all of our CBS 4 viewers for our Town Hall on Immigration, and of course our listeners for our radio partner, News Talk 710 KURV. We're continuing the discussion. Let's find out what's on the mind of this gentleman. Sir, please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
My name is Juan Garza Jr. I'm from Palmview, Texas. And my question is, we hear a lot on social media that laws are not being enforced all the time. But what are the laws that are being enforced presently for immigration?
Mr. Brand, are there laws being enforced, not being enforced? What are they?
I think we all get a mixed message about what's being done and what's not done. I don't believe the American people understand because it is a total confusion. There are laws on the books. A lot of us believe that if the government would just enforce the laws we had, a lot of this confusion would be eliminated. Just some consistent enforcement and nothing more.
Mr. Oliveras?
Well, I think the immigration laws being enforced goes back to something as fundamental as the bridge to cross. And Border Patrol, we see that in our communities every day. Border Patrol agents patrolling, enforcing the laws, people being detained for various reasons. So that is being enforced. I mean, there's a priorities and enforcement program, and the basic tenet of that is that people who are in immigration proceedings who have criminal backgrounds are prosecuted as a priority as opposed to a family or children who have no criminal background. I think that is what you're referring to, and that's where the prosecutorial discretion comes in.
Before I check with our social media desk, I'd like to make certain all of our viewers and listeners know that we have a number of people in our audience who are hearing impaired. We'd like to thank Sign Language Services of San Juan for providing translation services for those people tonight. So thank you very much for being here and being a part of this event. Of course, we've been weighing on this, we've been discussing this issue for about 15 minutes now, but our viewers at home have been weighing in for several days. So let's check with our social media desk. Tiffany, what do you have for us?
That's right. A lot of different questions. Jim asks, how can politicians justify spending money on illegal immigrants when we have vets homeless and living in poverty?
It's a great question. Ms. Merera, there's always a budgetary issue. Money only goes so far. How do we make those determinations on where money stops for one system, one project, one responsibility, and starts elsewhere? How do we make that call?
Sure. Well, I think we should start off by acknowledging that it's not as if the immigration, the budget that we use for the immigration directly takes away from what we use for our veterans. I do agree that we need more protections for our veterans, and I do agree that there should be no veteran that is homeless. I also think that we should also be protecting our immigrants. I don't think those two things are exclusionary to each other. I think as a nation, we should be able to take care of those two things at once. It shouldn't be one or the other.
Mr. Garza, so how do we make those priorities? Because one can say, as Ms. Merida, he says, it's kind of argumentative. That really isn't an either or. We have certain responsibilities to make. How do we make those determinations? Because a lot of folks, I'm sure, in this stage will say, we spend a lot of money in this country.
Yeah, certainly we spend a lot of money. You know, government spending has gone rampant. It's risen in the last, couple of decades on different government programs. What we see in the size and scope of government is a lot of programs that really have yet to help and really implement what they were intended to implement. While they had good intentions, they have yet, whether they're anti-poverty programs, assistance for our veterans, I agree, many of them are still homeless. Many of them are still, in the job market. I think there has to be an approach in the federal budget that says we are going to focus on federal priorities, of which addressing immigration reform is one of those. And while we're spending millions and billions of dollars on other government, subsidies or government programs that really have no long-term benefit, immigration does, because it is something that's near and dear to the Hispanic community and obviously to our country. It's an issue that's been in the media and as a conversational piece for many years. And so I think finally providing some federal funding that addresses comprehensive immigration, that provides comprehensive immigration reform, again, with a market-based approach to it, where the free market dictates the flow of immigrant labor, and we can have some kind of sustainable reform.
Mr. Oliveros, I don't want to get into specific candidates because we could be here all night, but certainly the current presidential election campaign, the whole issue of immigration seems to have taken greater prominence than it has in years past. Is it appropriate that it has the attention that it's received? And if so, are we perhaps moving in the right direction, at least trying to find solutions to our disagreements?
I think the way the conversation has come up is extremely inappropriate because it's been guided by hate and discrimination. I think it's important to have a discussion about immigration reform, and priorities and immigration policies, but it has to be in a reasonable way, not generalizing against entire communities based on their religion or their nationality. I think it's important to have that conversation, but it must be done in an appropriate way.
Now, Mr. Brand, I don't want to be premature because this program isn't over yet, but already we're 25 minutes into this, and we've had a very cordial discussion. While not everyone agrees with each other, we've had great conversation. Why can't we do this on the national stage?
It's, I hate to say it, but I believe in our form of government, and I believe in a two-party system, but it's not working. There's gridlock, and we're all caught in the middle of it. And how that's resolved, we resolve it on our local level. Our governor's done that. Law enforcement here in the county has done that as well. And so we finally have just come to the conclusion that we need to do what we can do where we are and wait for somebody in Washington, D.C. to get their head on straight and fix it.
We're back to the live audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
Mark, good evening. My question's actually for you. Are you feeling safe here? Have you heard any bullets whizzing by your head?
I think we're in pretty good shape right here tonight.
That's a good point to make for people to come down and visit us. And personally, I'm first generation, maybe illegal. I don't know if my grandfather or not immigrated from Canada with papers or not. And actually, I'm more concerned with Canadians overstaying their winter Texan visa.
Oh, come on.
That could be a problem.
So, panelists, I don't know how many of y'all reside here. Can you, by a show of hands, who lives here?
In the valley?
Grande Valley?
Yeah, in the valley. Oh, well, then y'all know it's safe to come and visit and stay.
No, it's been great. I've loved every moment of this. And I have been safe, although I haven't gone back out to my car. There could be a ticket on it for all I know. Great.
Could be.
Thank you very much. Sir, I know you have a question next. Do you want me over here, please?
Yes.
And please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
My name is Omar. I'm here from the city of McAllen. And my question, good sir, is actually to any one of you willing to answer. Immigration obviously isn't working. In 2014, in the summer, we had almost a state of emergency, according to our state senator, Juan Chuy Hinojosa. Is that where we're going to go in this area if we have programs like the healthcare district that is being proposed right now that may actually invite people to break the law and come here knowing that they'll get more benefits? Your question, or that's my question, folks.
Ms. Meredahi, is that a fair question? Do we sometimes provide incentives for people that perhaps maybe not otherwise would have made the trek, but you know, it's a pretty good place to live, and we offer some benefits that may not be available to other states. We're not talking about Mexico, even the Canadians. Are we sometimes providing an incentive that put people in a difficult situation?
You mentioned something important, difficult situation. I don't think what drives people to make the trek to the United States and risk their lives is welfare. I don't think people are leaving their home countries and their families behind to come get food stamps. That's not why people are coming and fleeing their countries. People are fleeing violence. People are fleeing sexual violence, sexual harassment. People are fleeing persecutions. People are not coming to the country and leaving everything that they know and everyone that they love because they hear that the United States is going to fill up their fridge or is going to send their kids to the doctor or is going to give them an education. Because that's not what's most pressing to them. What they know is their world at home. I think what we have to realize is that it's not the pull factors that it's coming to the United States. What they see here is safety, but it's more what's pushing them away from their home countries that's forcing people to migrate.
You know, this brings up an opportunity for me to address the question to my live audience here, and at the risk of finding myself unemployed tomorrow, I'm going to ask you a tough question. I'd like you to respond to the following statement with the sound of applause. Your two choices and answers are yes and no. And it follows off of what our panelists just mentioned about motivations for people coming here. News organizations have presented the immigration issue in a thoughtful, impartial, and balanced approach. Those who believe yes, please applaud. Okay, so I'll be looking for work tomorrow. You'll see my name on Craigslist. Those who believe no, please applaud. And it's actually important that we turn the camera on ourselves because, not speaking just for CBS 4, I think we recognize in our industry that we need to do a better job of relaying information and facts, regardless of how they fall, so that you can make proper and informed decisions. But if anyone's hiring, I'm probably looking for work tomorrow. Sir, please step up here for a moment. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
I'm John. I'm from McAllen, and I happen to be an immigration attorney, but that's neither here nor there. I believe that the really poisoned atmosphere about immigration springs a lot from the recession in 2008 and just the ongoing weak economy. I'm wondering if you agree with that, and also how can we educate people to realize that immigration actually helps our country economically?
You know, Mr. Garza, I think his comment is a good one because we went through a kind of a challenging period in 2008, right. 2009, and many Americans say we haven't really fully recovered yet. Is that part of the problem of why we're in this predicament today?
Oh, certainly. You know, it's part of the problem. I would suspect what we've seen since 2008, since the recession, is a adverse, slow recovery to the economy. People are still out of work or underemployed. In the Hispanic community, unemployment is higher than the national average. And to his point, looking at the state of Texas alone, the state of Texas, our economy depends a great deal on immigrant labor. And so to those who would support deportation, or to those who would say that immigrants are taking jobs, the Texas economy would take a hit overnight if immigrant labor was completely wiped out. Our country, many of the jobs that immigrants fill are vital jobs. you know, even here in South Texas. And so immigrant labor is obviously a source of not only revenue, but of benefit, not only to the Texas economy, but to the national economy. And, you know, and I will say again to your point, that I think there has been an impact on the slow economic recovery we've seen since 2008. Certainly that's played a role in the larger immigration debate.
And I want to get a comment from both Mr. Oliveros and Mr. Brand, and after that I have to check in with Tiffany to find out what our viewers at home think of all this. But simple question, does compassion have a price tag? Mr. Oliveros.
Not in my view. I think a very important angle of the immigration debate is the human rights aspect. The notion that the economic factors, as important as they are, must not cast a shadow on the human side of things. And when you're talking about families being detained or children being separated from their parents, I don't think there's a price tag to that. And that's a question that we need to ask ourselves as a society, as a country, what priority we give to those values.
And a quick follow-up before I go to Mr. Brand. Though, is there a point where we say enough is enough? I mean, we're about 315 million Americans. Is there a point where we say 400 is the right number, X number of immigrants is the correct number, or is it really no limit?
Do you mean in terms of the people that entered into the country? I mean,
yes, whether they're here legally or illegally.
Right.
Is there a point that we reach? Do we reach a breaking point, or is that not really even an issue?
In my opinion, the entire world is overpopulated. So I think we should take other measures to address that issue, environmental issues and the human consequences. But for example, I don't think that is one aspect that should drive the immigration debate. I think there are many other factors that drive population growth, but no, I don't think there's a number that we should say once the population of this country reaches a certain number, we should close the gates or build a wall.
And Mr. Brand, what are your thoughts in terms of, I addressed it earlier, I asked the question about, is there a price tag for compassion? And then at what point do we say enough's enough?
Well, we approved a $3.9 trillion budget, and we're only going to take in $3.39 trillion this year for the 2015 or 16 budget. And how long can we do that? If you watch what's going on in Europe right now, I believe that is a precursor to where we will be. And they have finally said enough is enough. Why? For no other reason than they cannot afford it. They cannot handle the volume of people. You talk about Italy, or Italy has shut theirs. They said no more. Germany was open arms and now has said no more. Because at some point, you never want to lose your compassion. But you have to know, you have to be responsible in how you do it. And there is a limit. We don't have, the luxury they have in Europe is they've got the European Union, so if any of them get in trouble, they go to the other guys and get some money. What are we going to do when we get to a point where nobody's going to buy our bonds anymore? We already experienced that throughout the world. The confidence in the dollar is weakening, and we know that. And we can't, you've got to be responsible, but you've got to know what your limits are. And I mean, that's part of being responsible. And I think the immigration thing is no, you cannot say we're just an open floodgate for everybody and anybody that wants to come. You cannot do that in a country. You see in Europe what's going on right now, and you can see the chaos in which they're in.
And the producer's telling me we're going to take a break in just a moment. Before I do, Miss Marita He, is there a shortage of grown-ups in Washington?
I don't think there's any.
No, they're grown up, they're just not mature.
And we're going to have to leave it there because they're telling me we have to find out what our... Okay, we have time. Okay, so instead, we'll put off the break. We're going to check in with our viewers at home to see what they think of all this. Tiffany, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Mark. A lot of feedback on Facebook. Everyone's using hashtag Your Voice, Your Future, but they're also saying words like glad, happy, excited about this town hall. Let's go to the latest Twitter question from Linda. She says, should DPS be protecting the border or Border Patrol?
So, who's in charge of the border, for goodness sake? I know it's a federal issue, but is it Texas DPS? Is it the Border Patrol? Who's got ultimate responsibility? Mr. Brand, what do you think?
We know that the Border Patrol by themselves were not able to handle it. We know that a lot of people told us there wasn't any problems in South Texas. In 2014, we had the surge. record numbers. Every city in the valley other than Rio Grande City was saying there's no problem, there's no problem, there's no problem. But in February of the next year, the federal government came out and said 53% of all illegal crossers to the whole United States came through Hidalgo County. There was a problem. Border Patrol is outmanned. They can't put a sentry on the river every mile and watch it. Now, I can assure you the cartel does. They have sentries throughout the whole river. They know exactly what's going on. And so the help that they've gotten from National Guard, DPS, Texas Parks and Wildlife, you know, it's not so much the human suffering that we're dealing with, it is the cartel. The issues we're talking about today are what I call the collateral of the real issue, which is the crime, and it is the drugs. And yes, they can't handle it. When we had all three of them here in 2014, the police chief of McAllen and the police chief of Mission will tell you that their crime rate dropped in Mission 18% and in McAllen almost 10%. And they gave the full credit to enforcing and covering the border. And so it's one of those things where if you don't have enough, we'll throw it in. Texas has done that. We've proven if you won't protect our people, if you won't protect from that element of what's coming across that river, then we will.
Well, we know the issue of border and border security has been at the forefront of what Washington's been discussing. And just earlier today, Texas Senator John Cornyn visited the border here nearby. So for our viewers at home and our listeners at News Talk 710 KURV, we're going to roll the sound for what the senator had to say on this issue.
It's more than just physical obstacles. It's the people, it's the boots on the ground, and it's the technology. We had an opportunity to see the aerostats now that have been fairly recently deployed and see the great advantage that that gives to our Border Patrol and law enforcement authorities in terms of managing the border.
Mr. Olivares, there's been so much disagreement over how to treat the border. Questions about, is there a wall? Should there be a wall? How tall will it be? What are the processes for people to cross? We know we can go anywhere around the valley here and see people crossing each and every day. There's certainly a process for certain people do that. It goes back to that question I addressed earlier, which I think most people have some confusion about. We don't seem to have a really comprehensive policy that makes sense, regardless of which side of the debate we're on. And we had the same discussion a few years ago and a few years before that, and it goes back really a few decades in terms of we're discussing the same thing today that we were discussing back in the 80s, back in the 60s. Why is that?
I think it's because of the lack of comprehensive immigration reform that is not, as you said earlier, not just reactionary, but proactive and addresses the issues and sets the priorities of this country when it comes to immigration. On the issue of security and law enforcement, I think it's important to keep in mind that when you have law enforcement agencies that are not, whose priority is not immigration enforcement, such as local police department and DPS officers, their priorities are controlling crime, whereas Border Patrol agents are detaining possible people who have crossed the border without authorization. That's a completely different set of issues. I agree that when there's drugs involved and when there's that type of issue, the two issues coincide. But otherwise, if you have a family, if you have a mother with her children crossing the border, that's a completely different issue than detaining a criminal. So that's why it's important to have different agencies focus on their priorities.
A lot of great comments and questions here. We're going to continue on with our live audience as well. But first, I have to find out what our viewers at home think about this and our advertisers especially. So let's check in with our advertisers at home. We'll be back in just a moment.
You're watching a special presentation of CBS 4 News Town Hall. Your voice, your future. Immigration.
We'd like to welcome back our CBS 4 viewers for our live town hall on immigration at the Bogus Ford Event Center. And of course, welcome back our listeners from our radio partner, News Talk 710 KURV. Let's check in with this gentleman. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Tom, and I am from McAllen. And first of all, I want to applaud Channel 4 for taking on this issue and, you know, bringing it in, not like the other networks, but a little more unbiased. My comments, you know, I fully...
Well, we don't know each other, right? So I didn't ask you to say that, did I?
I don't have to claim the $100? No, just kidding. Hey, I fully support immigration reform. And I guess everybody here must also support it if they think it's broken. My comments tonight are going to be toward the area of President Obama's DACA program, which impacts me personally. I think that our great senators from Texas are doing a great travesty by not addressing the issue of immigration. I don't know if either or any of you will agree with me. I think it's a travesty that they do not put a full Supreme Court in place to rule on DAPA, you know, and all of this other issues that are coming forward. I think that our senators need to do their job. And I think we need to let them know that they have to do a job. The process that we go through in DACA, send in all this information on children that were brought here very young. A lot of these children do not know any of the politics of their country. They do not know their culture. They are acculturated. They are part of us. But they are second-class citizens. They are not entitled to health care. They are not entitled to a lot of things. They're not here for the entitlement. They were brought here, we've educated them, and then we say, well, we need to get rid of them.
So your question is?
What do you guys think is the answer? You know, Supreme Court is going to rule very soon on DACA and DAPA, on a 8 Supreme Court justices.
And let me get a response from our panelists. Mr. Garza, what do you think? This issue's been out there for a few years now.
I agree with your frustration, as do many Americans, that there has been inaction on immigration reform. You know, just like everybody else, we are waiting on what the Supreme Court will eventually decide on DACA. You know, what I can say is that, you know, at the Leave It initiative, we support comprehensive immigration reform that doesn't separate families, especially children who have been in the country for long periods of time. We believe that they should be able to contribute to the American economy, that they should have the right to work here, that they should have some form of legal status so they're not living in the shadows. Same thing with, you know, with DAPA, with parents and whatnot, and immigrant families, that they should be able to contribute. And, you know, I'll say again that when you look at comprehensive immigration reform, that while border security is important, it shouldn't necessarily, you know, and I share your frustration that, you know, and many Americans share your frustration that the entire United States Senate, the entire United States Congress has failed to enact on both sides of the aisle that they'd be allowed to some form of legal status where they can work here. We should not be in the business of separating families. There has to be a you know, compassionate approach, but a reasonable and a free market approach that addresses labor market forces and does not separate families, especially children who are here in the United States at no fault of their own.
Ms. Mineta, anything to add on that?
Absolutely. I have seen firsthand in the Rio Grande Valley how DACA, Deferred Action Program for Childhood Arrivals, has positively impacted the lives of young immigrants. And I also know from my own family how programs like DAPA, programs that will help parents and family members of children who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents, how that will impact our families. Because immigration is not just with undocumented families, there's also mixed status families as well that impacts us as well. And I know how DACA positively impacts the life of people. And now DACA and DAPA, those two programs, we have DACA now. What we're waiting for the Supreme Court is the expansion of DACA and the implementation of DAPA. I have seen how those programs help people. And while they have limitations, they are a step in the right direction to help people become part of the fabric of our society. Our economy is like a quilt and we all put into it. We all have the responsibility and we should have the right to put into our economy and put into our culture. And although DACA and DAPA, they are not a permanent solution, they do not offer a pathway to citizenship, but our Supreme Court, I hope, will see how it will impact the millions of families, the immigrant families that are living in a nation, and will allow them to live out of the shadows, and families that are anxious and that are waiting to become self-sustainable and to be able to contribute to this country.
Mr. Brand, anything to add on this?
No, sir.
We've said it all right here. We're back to the live audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
My name is Michael Huerta. I'm a citizen from Harlingen. My question is, many of the immigrants coming into the country are finding the process to be very difficult financially, especially when you consider these are stipulations that cannot be met by most citizens from the Valley and from the rest of the nation. It holds a poverty level that isn't regional, but rather national. I feel this is discriminatory, knowing that most immigrants cannot meet these conditions. Do you feel that this has agitated the flow of illegals coming into the country?
So I want to make sure we understand the question. So you're talking about the economic situation?
Yes, the I-864 form requires that immigrants that are coming into the country make a certain amount of money or have a certain amount of assets, and the sponsors that endorse them either make a certain amount or also hold a certain amount of assets. Now, many of the illegals may feel as if they're being punished by the system due to the fact that they're trying to do everything correctly, but the system seems to only be holding them back. Now, most of the illegals will not try to go through this route because it is often too arduous for them. So they just go through the process undocumented. Would you feel that this has only created a worse situation for those that want to go through the process the right way?
Mr. Brand, I'll start with you. Any thoughts? It's kind of like the issue of people won't hire you unless you have experience, but how do you get experience if you don't get hired? So if you don't have the assets to come in and you don't have the means to get there, does it create a cycle that makes it difficult for people to come in legally? And are they going in illegally because they can't get that threshold?
Because they don't come with money. Is that what I think that's what I hear.
think that's the question, and that's something we addressed earlier. We talked about the difference between different types of visas, H-1B visas and so forth. There are visa programs out there that open the doors for anyone who comes in and invests $500,000. We open the doors wide up. Is that correct? Is that incorrect?
You know, I think for an illegal or an immigrant, whatever you want to call them, when they come and they have no money, they have a dream, they're going to escape their difficulties wherever they're coming from. But when they get here and they have no money, what is their options? One, be put with relatives or family that can support them until something's worked out. Two, we know that a small percentage, but there's a percentage that'll turn to crime. Or three, some kind of government assistance, if any way they can establish that. But the problem is, what you want them to follow the order of the options that are given and not go outside of those bounds and do something that all of us know is wrong. Be it crime, be it whatever. So I think that the difficulty is, you know, I've read several papers where people have said over the years that, you know, we will never solve the poverty of the world. Never. We're 316 million out of 7.135 billion people. And having worked in Central America for 20 years, it was very different how we could help people where they were instead of helping them here. To help them in their own countries. The amount of energy and time and money it took was so much more economical and efficient, and so much more they be able to done for them where they were than they are here. And so You know, I think there's a reason we have those laws. I think there's a reason you come in because you come in as a responsible citizen. You come in as a responsible immigrant. You come in as a responsible permanent resident, whatever it may be. That you come in responsible, and not but put a burden on all the systems that we have in place now. I don't know if that answers it or not, but.
Actually, I want to address it with Mr. Oliveras, but then I want to check with Tiffany to see what our viewers at home think about all this. I have a college-age daughter that I sent to a European country for 6 months to study abroad. I had to pay 6 months worth of living expenses into a Dutch bank before she'd be given a visa because they wanted to ensure she wouldn't be a burden. And I thought that was interesting because she's coming from the U.S., a family, college. So we see some differences in other countries. Is it unreasonable to expect people to have at least the means to support themselves in some fashion for a while? Or is that an unreasonable expectation?
I think it depends on the type of visa, and I think that's what the question was getting at. Some types of visa require that the applicant demonstrate that he or she has the capacity to support themselves, that they're not going to become a burden to society or to anybody else. So, but not all visas have that. All visas, humanitarian visas and certain special visas don't have that requirement because it's a visa with a different purpose. I think that requirement can be reasonable in certain circumstances, but I think it's also important to address the misconception that undocumented immigrants receive government benefits. They are not eligible for food stamps. They're not eligible for health care. So I think it's important to keep that in mind when we have this discussion that undocumented immigrants are not creating that type of burden. People who qualify for those type of welfare benefits that we as a society have decided to put in place are people who are here legally, either legal permanent residents, citizens, or people who have some sort of immigration status.
I'd like to take this moment now to check in with our viewers at home and to see what they think of all this. Tiffany, what's the latest?
That's right, Mark. We've got a lot of feedback on Facebook, on Twitter. Right now, the latest question is Steve asks, how do they tax illegal immigrants if they don't have to file their taxes and they don't have a social security number?
Ms. Mederahi, what do you think?
I'm not sure who said undocumented immigrants don't pay taxes, but I have family that is undocumented. I know many people that are undocumented, and they pay a lot of taxes. They pay taxes every time they buy something, and undocumented immigrants with U.S. citizen children can file their taxes. Even undocumented immigrants, if they file for an I-10, can file their taxes. Now, I work with a local organization named La Unión del Pueblo Entero, and our demographic is largely undocumented. And I can tell you, the busiest season for us is tax season. Our memberships go up, our offices are out of control because immigrants are eager to file their taxes. They're eager to be a part of this fabric of our society. So I think it's really a fallacy that undocumented immigrants do not pay their share of taxes. I've never seen that.
Mr. Garza, thoughts?
You know, I go back to the question that was asked before about immigrants coming to the United States and the example you gave of your daughter studying abroad. And I don't think it's unreasonable, but I will say that we are a nation of immigrants. Since the very founding of the United States of America, people have been coming from across the world to pursue the American dream. And I think what we've seen in our country is a diminishment of that opportunity with the size and scope of government spending and growth. And I think that while immigrants continue to come, there has to be a sustainable solution for them to remain here, to be legal. And I would say that once they have some kind of legal status, we will see them contributing in large part, in greater part, to the U.S. economy.
We're back to the live audience. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Ariel. I live in Edinburgh. My question is, being that there is a problem of the underreporting of sex crimes in the Valley, how would you go about changing that conversation when it comes down to immigrants who are these victims of violent sex acts? Because they go into police departments with a disproportionate amount of fear of being deported for reporting their crime, but the crime never gets addressed. So how would you go about changing that conversation to make it safer for all victims to talk about these issues?
Ms. Mederahi, I think you have an opinion on this issue.
I hope everyone has an opinion on this issue. But number one, thank you for bringing this up. I don't think sexual violence is something that's brought up enough for women, for men, and especially for immigrants. So thank you for bringing it up. I think that part of this, what we have to, or to answer this question, is also the trust of local communities to be able to report crimes to our local police and police police officers. Sometimes, like you said, immigrants are scared that if they report something, they're going to be deported. If they report something, they're going to be detained. And we see that all the time in the colonias, in our immigrant communities, which is why we have to make sure that our men and women on the ground that are enforcing the law, that they have very clear distinctions and their authorities are very clearly defined.
And I'm going to interrupt you just for a moment because I'm going to have to say goodbye to our live viewers on CBS 4. We're going to have to return to our regular programming. Of course, join us at valleycentral.com, and our listeners are at our radio partner, News Talk 710 KURV. We're still online with you guys, so if you're watching us on CBS 4, join us at valleycentral.com. Please continue your answer.
Sure.
Thanks for watching this special presentation of CBS 4 News Town Hall, Your Voice, Your Future. Integration
that happens in immigrant detention centers, and that is from other immigrants themselves, whether it's against women, a trans man, and also from, there has been reported cases of officers committing sexual violence to detained immigrants. And how do you report that? When they're telling you that you don't belong in this country, when they're physically, emotionally, and psychologically telling you that, why don't you just sign this voluntary form? There are cases of this reported. Sexual violence should be a priority in addressing the mental needs and the physical needs of immigrants coming into our country.
And Mr. Brand, we're talking about sexual violence, but basically any violent act is wrong. Is it fair that perhaps there should be some type of opportunity for someone who is here, perhaps illegally, concerned about deportation, if they're a victim of any kind of crime, should at least be able to report that so that issue can be dealt with and then not put themselves in that position, because it just allows, one would argue, it allows the proliferation of crime, targeting certain constituencies.
Absolutely. If you remember the hurricane, I believe it was 2010, and everybody was told to evacuate. And the state of Texas made it a point to say to all illegals, anyone who was here that was not legally here, you will be allowed to pass. You will be allowed to leave the valley, and no one will question you. That was huge, but it was a reason. It was humanitarian. But she's absolutely right. They need to have a way to do that, because a crime unchecked is another crime ready to happen. And if they go unchecked and repeatedly go unchecked, you're just asking for more of the same perpetrated on these people. So they need an avenue and a way to do that. Yes, I agree.
We're back to the live audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name's Eli. I'm from McAllen. I have a question. I had a situation about a week ago that I had a young lady that she was filing for a visa, not to be a resident, just for visa, just to work. And she was having a conversation with me on how she was denied and her brothers were accepted. She doesn't want to live off the welfare. She wants to work hard. She feels like someone's always in the back just keeping an eye on her. She doesn't feel free in a free nation. It wasn't her choice to come here. She was a little kid when she came in. Her parents came over. She was young, and she's been put in a situation where she feels like she's bound. And she told me, crying, I may have to go back to a nation I don't know Mexico. I've never lived there before. So she's going to a place she's never been part of. And my question is, what kind of policy do we have that can help this young lady? I mean, they accept half the family, but they didn't accept her because she didn't have enough information.
Mr. Oliveras, perhaps you've dealt with cases like this. How would that happen for some of us who aren't involved in that process, who haven't gone through it? It kind of defies logic that some of the family be accepted and some wouldn't. What would be some of the reasons for that, and how could this person overcome those challenges?
Right. I mean, I can't opine on the specific case, and if Eli, I believe was your name, he's saying that she did not have enough information. I don't know what type of information she might have been missing or what type of visa she was trying to apply for. But I think that example demonstrates one of the many problems with our immigration system, and those are the kinds of people that we want to welcome into our country, productive members of our society, like many of the ones we currently have who just don't happen to have regular immigration status. And that's one of the things that need to be addressed.
As a quick follow-up, in your experience, are there certain offices or certain days of the week where people are treated differently than others just because it's Fred working on Thursday and he's not as good as John on Monday, who's pretty good about following the processes and procedures and coming to the appropriate decision?
Every day, everywhere. You name the bridge, and that happens depending on what lane you happen to be crossing on. And most of immigration proceedings depend a lot on the person handling it, because there's a lot of discretion for the individual officers. So not all of them, but some of them do abuse that discretion. And that is a problem that continues to affect many people, and potentially that could be one of the reasons why this happened in this case.
And so, Mr. Garza, it could go both ways. People who perhaps are in a position to make decisions are being unduly harsh, or are being overly generous and not following the rules. So what mechanisms could we possibly put in place to ensure that whatever the rules are, we follow the rules? We don't like the rules, we change the rules, but let's follow the rules in place. How would we perhaps make that happen?
Every single day in any workplace, or both private or public government sector and government entity, you're going to find people, you know, you know, the gentleman was saying, is that, you know, they have discretion. And so I think there has to be a uniformity. There has to be uniformity across the board in saying, here's how we implement, here's how we address certain situations, so that nobody crossing into the United States is adversely impacted based on, you know, how that, you know, that ICE agent, or how that agent is, or that, you know, that civilian worker feels that given day, but that they're, you know, administering the law and implementing the law as it is across the board, regardless of who the person is crossing. And so I think there's got to be systems put in place that ensure that everybody is treated fairly and adequately when they're crossing into the United States.
Let's find out what this young lady has in her mind, and then I'm going to find out what our viewers at home think about all of this. So please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Anna Leon. I'm from Edinburgh, and my question is about the trans and queer violence that was mentioned earlier. I was wondering, as privileged people who are documented in this community, how can we put an end to that violence within the deportation,
the violence?
The detention centers, yeah. So how would we put an end to the trans violence, the sexual violence targeted not only at women, but like trans people and queer people and even children?
You know, I'm going to broaden that question too, specifically because for all of our viewers watching at home or listening to us on our radio partner, if they look at this situation and say, I don't like the status quo, something needs to change, how can they get involved? Whether it's with LGBTQ members of the public, whether it's with people who are looking for gainful employment. I mean, what should a viewer take away from this if they want to be involved in some fashion to make the process better? Mr. Oliveros, let's start with you.
First and foremost, go out and vote. That's a way to make your voice heard, but also participate in events like this, like today. Voice your opinion, raise the issues that concern you, and generate a debate that eventually will lead to change and progress in our society. Make the important issues for the members of that society be part of the political discourse that translates into potential changes in leadership at all levels of government, and that way the government reflects the values of the society that put them there.
Besides voting, are there non-governmental ways that people can be involved? Faith-based organization, advocacy organizations? Ms. Marietta, what do you think?
Sure, and I'd like to go back to highlighting the experiences of trans and queer people in detention centers, because I think oftentimes not highlighting them is what leads to the abuse and policies not taking place. Or even when Washington, D.C. does propose policies, they're not followed through. They're completely ignored. They're like passed out, and someone sends a memo to the public just to make sure, like, okay, quiet down, please. This is not okay. We should not be okay with immigrants in our country in detention centers being sexually abused when they've already probably experienced so much abuse on their way here. This is not okay. I think another way is for people that can't vote, is organizing, is going out and getting involved in your community, and also after voting, holding your people accountable, holding your senators, holding the people that represent you accountable, and saying, why are there no checkups in our immigrant detention centers? Why do they just send out memos and blast emails, and then they check how many people open it, and they put a really nice video on Facebook, and no one's actually monitoring if these things are being implemented? For the trans and queer community, we see trans men being detained with women and trans women being detained with men, completely erasing their existence. And this is not okay. I think that we should go out and vote if you can, and if you cannot, you should be out there organizing in whatever ability you can, and also the people that represent us should be holding the people that run the detention centers accountable to follow the memos that they share with the public.
Mr. Garza, what are your thoughts?
I would just say, you know, in the broader perspective of everybody involved, is that everybody should raise their voice. And you know, town halls like this that Valley Central has put on, and a panel discussion like the one we've had, a robust discussion, not only brings awareness, but it gets people involved. And you know, whether you're able to vote or not, if you're a citizen, you should certainly. But if you're not, never despise what that one moment can start a movement. And so at the Leave It Initiative, what we've done is we started government accountability, a campaign for government accountability, and where we hold elected officials accountable for the decisions they make and how those decisions not only impact the Hispanic community, but the country in general. And in regards to immigration, the U.S. economy, healthcare, education, a broad range of issues, in that, you know, the citizenry has a right to be informed, to make informed votes, informed decisions, and that they should be able to hold the people they put in office accountable for the decisions they make and how it's going to impact our very own community.
Mr. Brand, something to add?
Yes, you know, I was going to say in the ORR program with the kids, one thing I've noticed is that, first of all, there is one adult for every 8 kids 24/7. They have no doors on their rooms. No one can shut a door because there are no doors. So when they walk down that hall or look in that room, if those kids are in there, ain't nobody getting away with anything. And I think that's how they've addressed that, and I think they've taken a good approach to that, is that everything is open and there's no corners to hide. There's no place to go.
Please.
For trans and queer people in detention centers, it is a nightmare. For many, they will sign voluntary deportation at whatever risk they will be facing in their home country just to get out of the hell that they are living through in detention centers. Because many of these memos that have been sent down to protect LGBTQ immigrants in the centers, if the center suddenly does not have the capacity or has not been trained on sensitivity, since they cannot handle your case because you are gay or lesbian or trans, they will put you for days, weeks, or sometimes months in solitary confinement. And the psychological, the mental, and the emotional stress that puts on a person we should not be proud of that. It's one thing to be enforcing our immigration laws, but the treatment of how we have people in immigration detention centers, we should be very ashamed of that. And that is something that we should take into account, is that everyone in our immigration detention center should know how to protect and how to treat, whether it's a medical emergency, how to treat our immigrants in there. And if they don't, whether it's having no doors for children, but I assume that and many of them are not children that are immigrant detention centers, there should also be accountability towards that you won't put them in solitary confinement simply because you do not know or you have not been sensitized or you're not culturally competent to take care of the immigrants.
We've covered a lot of topics here so far this evening. Let's find out what our viewers think of all of this. Tiffany, what's the latest?
That's right. They've been enjoying all these questions and all these answers as well, but we've been getting all these broader questions. Now we're getting a little bit more personal. On Twitter, a user says, when a working immigrant father is jailed, separated from young U.S. citizen children for expired papers, who wins?
Mr. Garza, what do you think?
Nobody wins. Obviously, you know, we should not be in the business of separating families. That's why we believe strongly that there should be a pathway to legal status for those who are here, you know, especially children who are here at no fault of their own. You know, it's up to the government to decide what they're going to do based on whether an immigrant here commits a crime and at what level they choose to punish that crime. But I will say is that, you know, children should not be separated from the parents and parents should not be separated from the children. You know, immigrants are here to provide a better life for their family. That's why, you know, in large regard, they come to the United States, whether they're fleeing violence or they're coming here. They're pursuing the American dream, just like all of us who, you know, have the privilege of calling the United States our home. And so I think when you're looking at comprehensive immigration reform, there has to be a compassionate, you know, response to it. And separating families should not be the business of the federal government. It's unreasonable and it's not sustainable, and it's not the right approach.
We're back to the live audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is George Rice. I'm from Mission, Texas. My question is simple. Rio Grande Valley, especially Hidalgo County, we're one of the poorest regions in the United States, one of the highest tax regions in the state of Texas, one of the highest unemployment in the state. That's not including our undocumented population that we don't take into consideration. My question is, with our immigration crisis that we have here locally, are private entities like hospital, law groups, or law firms taking advantage, as some of you said, the prison system taking advantage of the situation, specifically the hospital tax that we're going to be voting on again this November coming up?
You know, there's a business component almost to everything that's going on out there. So and I think the question is, are there entities out there perhaps looking at this as purely a business opportunity as opposed to perhaps a public service or humanitarian aspect, or even just enforcement of the law? Thoughts, Mr. Oliveros?
I think, unfortunately, there is. We saw that phenomenon play out when DAPA was first announced, the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans. Unfortunately, many people took advantage of the hope of many families of obtaining some sort of immigration relief, and that led to many abuses. And it's so sad when it's the people that have the least that are preyed upon by, I don't know what to call them, but people from all professions who take advantage of the desperation and the glimmer of hope that some families had with that program as an example.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate because, again, CBS 4 is not taking position on this, but Mr. Brand, among the reasons that people come here is because some great economic opportunity. It's because Americans kind of figure out a way to make a buck off almost anything. So is that necessarily a bad thing?
You know, for you to ask me to figure out human nature and the good and its best and its worst is just this is just a pot of you know, a melting pot of just all of the take advantage of, genuinely trying to help or take advantage of the situation. That I don't think anybody can answer. I really don't.
We're back to the live audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
I am Ron from Harlingen, and during the course of this presidential campaign, I believe the fulcrum has come to be, as discussed tonight, about family as a basis for entry or merit. And the odd part about it is the candidates that are pushing the merit argument, for instance, a father as a preacher is always preaching family values, and yet they suggest we don't want to do families anymore. The party that epitomizes that in talk. But rather than not to get specific, the question I have is, if somebody comes in here entering without inspection, do y'all favor that eventually, if they follow the process, like the Senate voted in 2013 with 68 votes, to allow citizenship? How do y'all feel about that? Should they be allowed to get citizenship so they can vote?
It's the whole pathway to citizenship. Mr. Oliveros, there are people out there who said, look, if you don't belong here, go home. There are other people who say, you can't send 12 million people home. So for those who are here, let's assume for sake of argument, they aren't sent home or sent away. What should be the process for those people who are here illegally? What should they go through so that it's done legally and that we start with a clean slate?
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I think that was a good example that you brought, the plan that the Senate voted on and approved and then died in the House of Representatives. But that plan, which was bipartisan, by the way, provided a pathway to citizenship. It was not easy, it was not quick, and it came with certain civil penalties. People had to pay a fine. People had to pay taxes if they owed anything, because as Danny was saying, many of them actually don't owe taxes, they pay them. But something like that, it's something like that provides a way to legal status and eventually potential citizenship.
And would a process like that then also perhaps play itself out so that there is a group, let's say the number's 12 million, now let's say 8 million go through that process. Would that end up with perhaps a smaller number, 3 million, 4 million, who says, you know what, it's time for me to leave because I'm not going to do the following steps? Is it perhaps a good way so that those who don't intend to ever follow the rules, and that's a challenging thing to say, I appreciate that, but provides an incentive for them perhaps leave? Does that perhaps satisfy a lot of parties, both sides of the issue?
It might be. We've seen in the last 2 or 3 immigration reforms amnesties just blanket amnesties for everyone and starting over. And then a few years later, there's again the same situation. So perhaps a system, a gradual, a stepping stone type of system that leads to legal status and eventually citizenship would be a workable way. But unfortunately, currently with our Congress that cannot even vote on a Supreme Court nominee, that does not seem very hopeful.
You know, Mr. Garza, one of the things that some people have mentioned to me in the last couple of days, we often think of illegal immigrants, certainly Mexicans, but Central America, South America. But in recent months, we've seen an influx of another group of citizens that really weren't crossing the border before, and Cubans. And what I've been told anecdotally is because of the whole feet wet, feet dry policy, they're treated differently, that they're undocumented, illegal, whatever term you want to use, but because they're Cuban, we say, come on in. Is that a fair policy?
I think, you know, the U.S. government's approach to any immigrant has to be uniform across the board. And with the United States recently opening full diplomatic relations with Cuba after decades and decades of a Cold War era, cease of relations with Cuba, I think that there has to be, you have to readdress how Cuban people or Cuban immigrants are addressing the United States. That whether they're immigrants or refugees and what kind of benefits they get once they hit U.S. soil coming from Cuba. Obviously, there's a human rights issue to Cuba that needs to be addressed. There are many, human rights violations that Cuba is still, responsible for in the way they treat their people, which is not what the United States espouses. And so there has to be a conversation about how the United States addresses other diplomatic issues with Cuba. In regards to immigration, I will say that there needs to be legal status for immigrants. It is unreasonable that the United States would deport the 11 or 12 million undocumented immigrants to the United States. I mean, how the government intends to do that is beyond me, but there should be a way for them to live here, come out of the shadows, and contribute to the economy, and be able to live freely in the United States. And what that legal status looks like is obviously up to Congress, and I'll say again, Congress needs to finally act on it, where it's a long-term approach, a systemic approach, where people, immigrants who come to the United States, have a work visa. They're allowed to live here. They're allowed to work here. They don't have to live in the shadows. They shouldn't be afraid of, speaking to a law enforcement officer for fear of deportation or splitting families up. How that looks like up to Congress. What we say at the Leave It Initiative is, let's make that happen. That we should advance policy initiatives that help people come out of the shadows and contribute and live in the United States freely. But finally, Congress needs to act. What in regards to how Cuba and how the United States addresses immigrants, there needs to be uniformity across the board. Now that diplomatic relations have been open with Cuba, prior to the administration making that happen, obviously they were categorized differently. Now that we have diplomatic relations, obviously that has a conversation that needs to take place.
Now I understand one of our hearing impaired visitors tonight would like to ask a question, and if I can get our translator and our guest, if you would join me over here, if we do that, so we can get the question in, please. First of all, Ann, I want to remind everyone that translation services tonight are being provided by Sign Language Services of San Juan. So thank you very much for being here and helping us with our guest. So please tell us who our guest is, where she's from, and what is her question.
My name is Marla Martinez, and I am from FAR. And my question tonight is, many children who come across the border unaccompanied by parents, they come alone, and they are detained, they have no voice, they have no way to advocate for themselves. How is it that we can help them, or who can we contact to help these children who come unaccompanied and have no voice to speak for themselves?
Mr. Brand, it's got to be the scariest thing out there for a youngster. I really use that term, youngster. I'm not talking about the 19 and 20-year-olds. I'm talking about the young teens and younger to come over here for whatever their motivation is to enter another country. What should be our moral obligation, and what are our legal obligations, and are they the same, or are there some differences?
Well, let me just say this. When Border Patrol brings these kids to an ORR facility, the first thing they do is they give them 5 immunization shots, a physical, clean set of clothes, sometimes 2 sets, brand new tennis shoes, a hot meal, a clean bedroom, air-conditioned room, and 3 hot meals a day. They're assigned a social worker. Each one of them get their own social worker. They get to make a free phone call anywhere in the world when they get here. And they get to make free phone calls on a weekly basis to family members. I think they do a pretty good job. I can't speak for ICE, but I know for ORR, having watched what they do, I think they make these kids very comfortable. I think part of the proof of that is, in the 9 years that I've watched it, is that they have what they call their runners. Because remember, there's no locks on anything. There are no locks on gates or doors anywhere for these kids. They could get up and leave anytime they wanted. And I can tell you, in the 9 years they've had the program that I've watched, they've had less than 1%. Because these kids have never had what they're getting and how they're being treated. They go to 5 classes a day. They play soccer, volleyball, basketball. They're given free time in the evenings. They're given free time on weekends. And on those free times, they're given other alternatives that are voluntary for them to participate in as well. So I think, I can't speak for all of them, but I know for that program, I know it's a good start. I believe it to be a good start. I think the proof of the pudding is those kids don't get up and leave.
Mr. Oliveros, and this seems like a fair and compassionate approach, but then sadly, there are some young people who are exploited for this very reason because they're used to bring in illegal products, whether it's drugs or what have you. And we're a compassionate society and we don't want to victimize, if you will, the youngsters, but they're being victimized on the other side. How do we stop that process? Is there a way, are we to end that cycle that we would all consider repugnant?
Right, no, it's a very serious problem, and we see it here along the border with many underage kids being involved in or forced to be involved in drug trafficking and other such crimes along the border. It's a tragedy, and I think that's why we need to provide more resources for them, for ORR, and for those good programs that exist out there that sadly do not benefit everybody, because not everyone gets to those programs. So there's still some family detention and worse circumstances. But the programs that do exist, I think, need to be revamped to ensure that the kids who are victims of such crimes that you were mentioning, or are being forced to commit crimes like that, can have access and be able to escape that cycle.
And we're still good here. A follow-up?
Yes. So my point, or my question has to deal with deaf children. What do they provide these deaf children that come across with no voice and no parents or anyone to support them or help them? How do they help these deaf children?
Mr. Brand, you have experience at all with the deaf children? And my apologies for missing that earlier.
Yeah, no, they do. They, you know, believe it or not, I was amazed to see some that came in wheelchairs. How they got there, I don't have a clue. But they do have kids that show up with special needs, and they are very responsive to filling those needs for them. I've been totally impressed with what they do in that regard. But yes, they do have, if there's special needs, they take care of them. If they have kids that come over with scabies or whatever it is, they are taken immediately and isolated from the population of the rest of the kids, and they're given one-on-one and taken care of.
Ms. Meneda, you see is there anything else perhaps we can do for these special needs youngsters?
I'm glad to know that there are programs that address the needs of all the children. I think also for young children, it is important that they get due process and that they get a fair chance at staying in the country, and that we don't have federal judges saying that they can teach immigration law to a 3-year-old and that they can defend themselves in court. I'm glad their treatment while they are in custody of the federal government is good, and I also hope that when they are in court, they get a fair chance, just like everyone in this country gets, to represent themselves and to propose their case.
I'm sorry, I need to clarify a little more.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, I just need more clarification, because my point is not children with special needs, children in wheelchairs. My question is children like me who require an interpreter like I am here now. Do they have interpreters for children who are at, or that, you know, throughout the country? You know, that's great that they're providing different services and for other children with other disabilities, but for me, for deaf kids, that's my question. There is deaf children that come across. How do they help the deaf children who come across?
Yes, they are. They are given assistance.
Great, thank you. And sir, you want to get back in here, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're almost out of time, so if we can squeeze one more question in.
Yeah,
and you joined us earlier. Just remind us again who you are, where do you live, what is your question?
Yes, my name is Royal Lamont. I live in McAllen, Texas. You said earlier that you might be out of a job. Well, I hope my next question doesn't get you fired. Okay.
That makes two of us.
The Republican presidential frontrunner, Mr. Donald Trump, said that if he's elected president, he was going to build a wall about 10, 20 feet high. If he's elected and that wall does go up, would that deter or just motivate more illegals to cross the border, just so they can say, hey, you build this wall, but I can still come over?
Mr. Olivares, there are physical walls. There are other kinds of walls. Should we have a wall?
Absolutely not. It doesn't make sense from a policy perspective, from a humanitarian perspective, just practically. The vast majority of the people who are here undocumented came over legally and overstayed their visas. Building a wall is not going to have any impact on that whatsoever. In addition, for legal reasons, environmental reasons, and just practical reasons, any wall that's built cannot be continuous throughout the entire border. We currently have a wall that was built several years ago to the cost of millions, if not billions of dollars to taxpayers, that benefited some politicians because they were able to say that they were tough on immigration. And we still have the same situation. I mean, in 2014, when we had the additional influx, families and pregnant women were crossing over because the wall is not continuous. So practically, it doesn't make any sense. But most importantly, from a policy perspective, it's nowhere close to even resembling a potential solution to the immigration situation.
And we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave that as the final word. We've had lots of questions here tonight, a lot of discussion, not agreement on every issue, but the one thing that hasn't been debated, and I think everyone here is in agreement on this, is why do people come to this country illegally? And it's not, to leave a home, to often spend their life savings, perhaps embark on a dangerous journey to come to America, isn't necessarily about jobs or schools or property. It's for the freedoms and individual liberties and the opportunities that are available here in this country. And in spite of all our blemishes and flaws, the United States still stands as mankind's greatest hope on the face of the planet. I'd like to thank our panelists for the wonderful job they did. I'd like to thank our radio partner, News Talk 710 KURV, for being a part of this. I'd like to thank the City of FAR for the use of the Bogus Ford Event Center. On behalf of our live audience here, the fantastic crew of CBS 4, I'd like to thank you at home for joining us. Make certain you go on our Facebook page at facebook.com/CBS4RGV. Tell us what you think about this. We'd like to thank Tiffany for the wonderful job she did talking to our viewers at home on social media. And of course, those of you at home, make sure you watch our late news for coverage of the town hall and all the day's breaking news. And in closing, we'd like to salute our military, law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, and other emergency personnel for their service to our communities and our nation. I'm Mark Hyman. Good night.